Welcome back, everyone, from the various stimulating workshops you have been in this afternoon to our meeting place here for the panel discussion. I will be moderator. I'm Shanti Georg, independent researcher. I represent the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation and community. We are delighted that one of the key questions for the panel comes from our strategic plan, namely that digital media should cultivate our humanity and not undermine it, which already came up in the opening session. We are delighted also that ELIANT sets questions about digital media and children within the wider context of values and a culture of citizenship and democracy. The questions that are being raised about children's exposure at various ages to the digital media are not being asked only by ELIANT. I have here The Economist, not the most anthroposophic of magazines. And a recent cover talks about social media's threat to democracy. And the most recent issue has an article from the US called Me, Myself, and iPhone. Teenagers are anxious and depressed. Could the culprit be the phone in their pocket? It quotes the finding of a social psychologist, Jean Twenge, I pronounce it the European way, who has written a book about why our super connected kids are less happy. A recent article in The Guardian as well talked about these issues and mentioned that the people who produce this technology in Silicon Valley make sure that their own children have very limited digital exposure. So it's time for us to listen to our panel. And later we will listen to you. We will do this all together. What we will first hear from our panel is a report back on the workshops that they were speakers at, not simply narrating what happened, but taking the discussion forward. Each speaker will introduce himself or herself and then tell us what was the most significant experience for them at the particular workshop, what was the most interesting question that challenged their perspectives, and what they see as the way forward. Let us begin with Georg. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Georg Soldner. I'm Paediatrician, and my function now is I'm deputy head of the medical section with my colleague Matthias Gierke following Michaela Klöckler. And my workshop was working on the topic digitalization and health. And we focused more on early childhood. And I think what was really interesting that it came very clear, we do not simply to have accept smartphones and other electronic devices in early childhood. We do not accept today alcohol in this time. In 200 years ago, little babies, they were calmed down with beer, for example, in Bavaria. Today, no one does that. So we do not have to accept it because it's a new technology, but we can change our behavior. And the most important is self-education of the parents. This turned out very clearly. And self-education needs also help, offers by ourselves to give advice, to give information to the parents who want really to make their own decision in this topic. And so as a next step, it could be that we start educating the students in high school in parenting, because there today we have a lack of education. We have big questions in education, but no offer in school, in high school, and we think we should start there. Right, just as a short report from our workshop.
So much, Georg. Just to make it interesting, we won't go in a standard order. Instead, I will now ask Edwin to introduce himself and report on the workshop. Thank you, Edwin.
My name is Edwin Huebner. I'm I'm working in the Free University in Stuttgart. I'm a teacher trainer. I was for 30 years teacher for mathematics and physics. We had the speech between Ms. Reichertz and Thomas Fuchs. There was a opposition, and I tried there to combine it. We have to accept that the children live in this world, but we have them to give in the school all these strengths they couldn't get in their normal life. We have to give in the school those opportunities to get the strengths, the inner strength, and that I had described in this small booklet. You can find it outside. An indirect media pedagogic and a direct media pedagogic. The indirect media pedagogic gives the children all these opportunities to grow up in a good way, and the direct media pedagogic that they understood how media works and how to get in a good way. That was what it tried to say. I spoke in German because my English isn't so good. And there were some questions. One question was how to get the parents in. That was an important question, really important question, because education only works when parents and teachers work together. And another word from somebody who said, yeah, what do you think about, we had the cars, and they were wonderful, and what is the future of computers? And I said, yeah, wonderful, we had cars, but nowadays we have always still cars, but we are we spoke about the air pollution from the cars, and all the negative effects of driving, and so we are the first who say computers and media, wonderful things, we have to use it, but they have negative aspects, and we have to speak about this now. So as the same way we speak about pollution of the air. Yeah? And that is our topic. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Edwin. We now turn to Joan.
My name is Joan Almond. I'm a co-founder of the Alliance for Childhood and directed it in the US for a number of years. We, in the Alliance, have published several reports about technology and children, looking at it from different angles, and I have copies of reports here if you want to look at them, but also they're online on our website, which is allianceforchildhood, one word, .org. Under publications, you'll find those and a number of other publications, including our newest book, which is about play. I have some postcards about it here. I was helping to lead a workshop on the young child and the digital world, and one of the things that made a deep impression on me was Christopher Clowder from England, who was doing the workshop with me. He had a beautiful quote from the book of Proverbs from the Bible, describes a little child, and a playful child, and what joy this child brought to God. And it struck me because when I was a kindergarten teacher, and when there was the children were playing and there was this hum of play in the classroom, I would sometimes think, this is as close to heaven as you are likely to get on this earth. There is something quite divine about children at play. And so we talked quite a bit about play and how to strengthen children's sense of being a human being before they become an enhanced human being with chips inside and whatever will come next in the world of technology that will confront them, but how to ground them first in the real world, the three-dimensional, multi-sensory world, in their own world, their own heart as a human being. And the question that intrigued me, that came up, and we were just discussing it again over the break, is what about virtual reality? And what role might it play? And as with other virtual things, my feeling is always first things first. Let's immerse children in this three-dimensional, multi-sensory world. Let's help them find themselves and their place in that world. And then I can imagine in adolescence, it would be great fun to create virtual reality programs, and it's a highly creative thing, I'm sure. But first things first, children really need the real world first. And I just think that's going to become more and more important as this line between the digital world and the human world gets fuzzier. By the time chips are implanted more fully than they now are, that line will get fuzzy. And so it becomes a question of helping children discover, grow up to become real human beings. And then can come the technology in one form and another. What should be the next step? I think that is the next step, is to re-emphasize the human aspect of being a human being, and our connection to nature, our connection to one another, our connection to the divine world, our connection to ourselves, the arts, the play, all the things that are so wonderfully human about us. That's it.
Many thanks, Joan. The panelists so far have all come from the anthroposophical tradition. Now let's listen to a somewhat different voice, Konstantin.
Hi, good morning. Morning, something like that. So I'm Konstantin Scheller. I'm from the European Commission, working for what's called a Directorate General, so you can think of it as equivalent to a ministry at EU level for education, culture, youth, and sport, I believe. So I'm from the education side, a policy officer, so working on bringing innovation to education. So addressing, on the one hand, digital competence teaching, so looking at how do we improve the teaching of digital competences across schools, but also higher education, adult learning, vocational education. On the other hand, addressing digital technology use in education, so what role does technology play in education? And I have a favorite quote, if I have 20 seconds to mention it. I can't really quote it right because it's in a language I don't speak, but it's from Konrad Gessner. Ever heard of him? No? Thought so. So Konrad Gessner is a gentleman who wrote a nice book about the dangers of technology, and what he wrote there, it's he warned of data overload, the confusing and harmful nature of data overload. The problem is he was writing in the 1500s and he was talking about the printing press, the confusing and harmful nature of too many books in the world. Now I think that's just the perspective a bit I want to consider in the work. And so from the workshop, I attended the one on age-appropriate digital curricula, looking at sort of what's the right way to go there, with fellow panelists over there. And I think I'm happy that we all agree sort of we're looking at what's best for the child. We're looking at what's in the interest of the young person that we have in education, and that's really the priority. How do we help them live a good life? There's lots of great practices in Waldorf teaching. That's sort of, for me, the big takeaway, of course. Georg Franz, apologies, presented some great practices there, so I'm very happy to have seen those. Teacher training was one of the questions, the teacher training as a key issue to address. And of course, what role are the parents? And if parents are opposed to technology, what can you do? How can you bring everyone along? That was a very good question to ask. So I think as next steps, for me, important is addressing those questions. Thank you.
And thank you, Konstantin. Now the conversation continues with our final panelist who was at the same workshop. Franz, we look forward to hearing.
I already guessed that it's my turn. My name is Franz Glaw. I'm a Waldorf teacher and I'm married for 35 years. I have to say that because I hope my wife doesn't see this video. I have to come close to Joan because the microphone doesn't reach far enough. Okay. I have been in the workshop with Konstantin, and one of our questions was what happens in the classroom? What happens in the classroom? Ingo Leibner, who's among us, he said best childhood is without digital media. But childhood doesn't last 18 years. So what shall we do in the classroom and, more important, outside the classroom when childhood ends? And there's a lack of knowledge in this part. So what I did is making projects with digital media with my pupils. and I'm strictly speaking, media pedagogue since 1964. Because following that what Mr. Fuchs told us, my childhood was very lucky. My parents were rather poor, but I had a lot of siblings and a lot of fantasy. So, what was the experience in this workshop? It was very interesting to see that Konstantin and I, we both had so much in common and could agree on common ideas. Therefore, I would like to encourage the exchange between the political field and the educational practice. And question, what left behind, what was new for me in this kind of importance, the data protection, yes, there was a question from participant, and the importance of teacher education in the sense of continuous professional development. And the next steps, I think we have to exchange cross-sectoral on the experience you make in the practical application of media pedagogy.
Thank you very much, Franz. The discussion is now thrown open to the audience who have been listening, and I have been seeing the expressions on the faces as various points were made on this side. So please feel free to raise your hands to respond, and these are strong panelists. You can challenge them in what they have said. We will go in the order that hands are raised. Please first say your name and your organization, and we will give preference to people who have not spoken yet. Please raise your hands.
My name is Daniel Kropf from the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation. I've participated into a conference in Israel, actually, that was talking about well-being in media. And the suggestion and recommendation from that conference were twofold. One, that one should look at the virtual spaces as the way we look at the city. We regulate, we have traffic lights, we have local regulation for everything. So the one recommendation was that the virtual spaces would need to be regulated the same way as our real spaces are regulated in order to support the well-being of all its participants. And the second recommendation that was given was how can we work with those that develop the algorithm that support the virtual spaces so that they are designed in a way to enhance the well-being of the users. Today, in terms of the human development aspect, that they are supporting more human addiction than human development. So how can we actually begin to cooperate with those who actually work in the virtual spaces to develop processes that are supporting of our humanity rather than the contrary? So I just wanted to report back as input from that conference. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we will collect questions if possible and then return to the panelists.
Hello, I'm Anna Totfarusi, and I think that first of all I talk as a grandmother of a 2-year-old son, but I also have a center for anthroposophy that we are running in Budapest, and my impression is that we should have here much more young people, because I think that we need to involve them, and our task is to try to understand what they need and how we can help them get their message, because it is the way that we can really touch the generation. So I was very, very happy to hear Georg about the education at high school, parenting education. My 10-year-old boy said we should have Waldorf class in the school. Like, you know, a theme that should be Waldorf, teaching Waldorf, what means Waldorf. And this is actually the parenting education, giving these kind of values. And I would take the opportunity to invite whoever is interested in organizing a continuation with a much, much younger public for this conference. I think we could host it, and we should involve all those people because they are really getting much more active and involved, and they can address really this issue much better than we do.
That's an excellent point, Anna, and I'm happy to inform you that very shortly we will have a contribution from one working group consisting of high school students. I'm very happy that we can respond in some way to what you have said, though of course your idea of a follow-up conference of largely younger people is an excellent idea. So maybe this is the moment to hear from the panelists again, and we will go now in the direct order, beginning with Georg. You have heard questions about regulating the internet and electronic media as we regulate the city. We've heard questions about algorithms emphasizing human development rather than human addiction. We've heard about data protection. We've heard about young participation. So what are your answers, Georg?
Well, there is not one answer, but the first thing is really to increase resistance and resilience. And we spoke about also about the two polar roles of the parents in a family, that there is a male role. It's not dependent on sex. It can also be a lesbian couple or a gay couple. There's a male role and a female role. And the one role is more focused on the home, being close with the child and so on. And the other role is to go out, playing outside, also doing some risky games, maybe doing something a little bit wrong from the point of view of the mother role. And this role is missing in our societies, especially after the Second World War. The father disappeared, and we have no farmer families today. We had, for example, in Germany, 1950, 44% of the whole population were working on farms. There, the father was always present. Today, no one is going outside, especially with the boys, and then we have big problems. So I think we have to think about how do we bring the children to play outside, to be connected with both parents, because we know this triangulation also, this different relation to the one and to the other of the parents is a strong factor that gives also resilience to spend much time with these devices. Thomas Fuchs told us that the white areas, the areas where nothing happens, are very dangerous. When I'm looking to cities like Mumbai or Sao Paulo or so, and I see the children there, and I see that there is no space for the children, no green areas. They are very, for example, in Kolkata, there are 4.5 million people living on 178 square kilometers. And there it's really, really difficult to offer this place, these games outside to these children. So we have really to think about our whole environment and how we go on. It's not an isolated question of electronic device, but if we really put all the children in a cage where then it's the only possibility to connect with outside, or if we offer the children really the possibility to play and to go to nature and to be accompanied not only by women but also by men a little bit, that help them to find the joy and the possibility to develop themselves bodily. Because what is my message to you, especially to the European Commission, you cannot think about pedagogic without taking into account the bodily development. The brain does not exist isolated. We know that, for example, the microbiome, the gut, the muscles, that all influences what you are capable of doing with your brain. So please, we are all responsible to create an environment which invites the children to play around, and then the electronic devices are not such a big problem. last not least, if the father is working for 3 weeks in Japan or the mother is in Hamburg for 3 days, being connected by Skype, for example, is wonderful. So not everything is bad, but it has really a part integrated in our relation. If I have a relationship with my father or so, then Skype is no problem. But Skype cannot create a relationship.
Thank you, Georg. Konstantin, you have not just the questions and the points to respond to, but a direct comment from Georg. We look forward to hearing your answer.
Okay, thanks so much. Just to answer maybe first to the question of the audience. So the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation gentleman, sorry, thank you, said how can we work with companies who produce the things that are online? I think the key element actually is there. It's not a question of law, because laws apply to the internet, laws apply to internet companies. The question is much more often technical. It's sort of legal difficulties that the complexity, the globalization involved there. So it's a really complex issue, but maybe not for this panel, but definitely something to be addressed. I think often it's a legal system, it needs more capacity in addressing those. The region of Salzburg, data protection, I mean, we have a new data protection regulation, which is coming into force next year. In general, that the aim there is to help protect children and citizens. So I hope that will help somehow. I'm not sure what exactly the question was. And of course, the third question was, we have to involve the parents, we have to make sure, we need to talk to young people. So how do we get to the people that actually need it? How do we talk to the children, the youth, and help them address what they think is relevant? I think that's maybe where our positions actually differ, in the sense of, from our position, it's a matter of ensuring what you teach in education is relevant as much as possible to the children's life. So you want them to have a good development, you want them to support their childhood development, of course. At the same time, you need to listen to reality, and the reality is 2-year-olds are using smartphones and tablets. We cannot change this reality.
Oh yes, we can.
Well, you can wish.
Oh yes, we can.
Please let Konstantin speak, please. You will have your chance later.
How will you change this reality? Will you have a law that 2-year-olds cannot touch smartphones? Yes. Will you have the police come into the homes of parents and tell them, don't let your child touch the smartphone? I mean,
how do you think about smoking with children? It was usual 30 years ago. No one does it today.
Smoking. How do you prevent 12-year-olds from smoking? You can slap it out of their hands when they're on the street, but you cannot prevent them if they're at home or in the garden. No. I think you can have legal solutions for everything, but they're not necessarily going to work that easily. So I think you have to address the reality of children encounter technology in their everyday lives. There's no question about it. I think you cannot doubt this. There's no reality where this is not the case. They encounter it. Whether you like it or not is another question. Whether I like it or not is not the question either. It's a reality. So the question is, how do we help children deal with this reality? So if you don't teach them and they get a smartphone, they're going to do what's easiest, what's most fun. They're going to end up in games. They're going to end up on Facebook. They're going to end up watching whatever things on YouTube. That's what happens if you don't help them develop the capacity to use a device well, to use them in their own interest. Now, this is the role of education, to show the children and young people and adults and older adults, everyone has often this lack. Many adults are addicted to technology, to Facebook, to whatever it might be. So how do you help individuals, particularly talking about, of course, about children, how do you help them develop the capacity to deal with this world they encounter? I think that's the key element here we have to answer, in the sense of, that's the role of schools. Ideally, it's the role of parents, but factually, many parents don't know how to do that. Many parents might not themselves have the capacity. I know many mothers and fathers who are addicted themselves to Facebook, or YouTube, or whatever it might be, Netflix. So how can they teach their children? That's where the school comes in. Ideally, you have the perfect parent, the perfect family, where the parents know what's best for the child and they help them develop themselves, they give them what's appropriate, they watch them when they're doing things, but that's not the reality. So in reality, how do you address in a classroom where 2-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 12-year-olds encounter tablets, might they have their own tablets, smartphones, laptops, how do you help them develop the capacity to use these in their own interest? I think that's a key question, and we cannot get into the depths of pedagogy in the classroom and so on here, but I think that's I think we cannot ignore that. So we have to address it somehow. How the exact response is still open. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Edwin?
When I was 15, I began to smoke. very hard. I was about 40 cigarettes a day. When we were with the class to excursion, we smoked together with the teachers. When I was in the last year making an excursion with my pupils, it was strongly forbidden to smoke because we have laws. There were some pupils who were addicted. So said, we want you to speak with your parents, and when the parents allow it, we close our eyes. For you, for the other not. So we can change something. The other one is what I want to say to the, we have three worlds we live in. We have the virtual world, computers. We have the real world where we live with others, and we have an inner world. These are three worlds we live in, and we have to have two thresholds. These three worlds are very different, and we have to be competent to all these three worlds. So the inner world, how do I become competent to the inner world? You said in the 1500, where it said information overload. Yeah? You can see how far we are away from living naturally. Yeah? It's constantly getting faster and faster. Now we are high speed. Yeah? And so we have to learn to slow down. I think today to become resilient, as Georg said, you have to spare out half an hour a day where you come to yourself as a meditation or read something or what you want to do. Yeah? Half an hour to be just for yourself. I think it's necessary to survive. Yeah? That's the one side. The other side is you have to be competent to the virtual world. You have to know what you can write there and what not. Yeah? So that's the other side we have to teach the children in.
Many thanks. Joan?
Is to work on public education campaigns. And so we've worked with the New York Times and the Washington Post and other key publications to get our message out. So I don't believe in stopping by saying, today's digital technology is a reality. We have to accept it. We have to, in a way, just roll over and let it overtake childhood. Doesn't mean that we can ban it. I'm not a big enthusiast for laws that ban things. But it does mean that one can do a public education campaign that raises the issues, that parents, educators, youth themselves, children become more informed, like they've been about tobacco. When tobacco first became an issue in the US, I never thought people would stop smoking, frankly. But they have, not everyone. But the number of smokers has been cut in half. When I was in college, we were given little packs of 3 cigarettes, as gifts from one of the cigarette companies. I mean, nobody would do such a thing now. It's impossible to even conceive of doing such a thing. Public education campaigns can work. They take time, they take focus, they take hard work. It's often said, if you want to see real social change, live a long time. It takes time. But right now in the US, where we've had almost no public education campaign about digital technology, our young people, ages 8 to 18, spend over 7 hours a day with screens outside of school. Many of them have their own screens in schools now, but outside of school, over 7 hours a day. Little children, 1-year-olds, 29% spend 90 minutes a day with screens. 1 to 2-year-olds, 64% spend 2 hours a day with screens. This is what happens when you don't have a public education campaign. Technology runs rampant because, of course, the technology companies invest huge amounts of money convincing parents that if their children don't start young, they will never make it in today's world. But they will. All the great computer people in the US didn't start till they were 12 or so. You don't have to start young. So I think, for me, part of the answer is get out there and talk about these issues. We don't have to demonize technology. We all tend to use it as adults, probably overuse it. But we can say this is not good for children. certainly not in the amounts that they have. It's so out of balance. Michaela, you spoke about balance this morning. It is largely a question of balance. When to begin, how much, and so on. But if we don't do something, I can tell you, you can look at the US, which has done almost nothing, and the numbers are just staggering of what happens to our young people. And this unhappiness, talking about Jean Twenge's work, it's shocking when you look at her data of the amount of anxiety and depression in our young people that has grown decade by decade over the last 20 years or so. So it's serious, you know, just like tobacco is serious and too much alcohol for young people is serious, and so on. These are real issues, but and there's not going to be a quick solution, but we at least can begin to change public perception around this issue.
Thanks, Joan. Franz.
Okay, I want to say something to the issue data protection. And you asked how is it at your schools. First of all, parents are very sensible because of the data from the pupils. And it's better? So, okay. We have no data in the internet, just on local computers. Our website is at a provider in Munich, in Germany. And the computers we work with, they are not connected, and we don't use Dropbox, we don't use WhatsApp, and so on. But we use YouTube. And when I first gave in the word Waldorf Schule at YouTube, it was in the year 2005, yeah. And it was a catastrophe, what I saw. And you can't say something against. And I founded an own YouTube channel, and we make good content by our own. And I talk to the students what I'll do and what the other students do and what there's to seen in the YouTube channel. And sometimes some people say, oh, I don't want to be seen, and that's okay. And we have very often TV stations in our school. They want to report from Waldorf school, and if they want to, they do. And if we don't give answers, they ask other people. And so we have a lot of TV shows about our school, and yes, and we have a good reaction. At least to the other issue, I want to give a message from my youngest son. I'm not only married, but I have also 4 sons, and I never had problems with computer and smartphone. I want to give them, when they were old enough, 16 or 17, please take my old smartphone, I don't need it. They said to me, I have my own social network in the real life. And in this little booklet, Shock-Headed Peter Part 2, it's for parents. Edwin and I, we worked on this. There are some experiences from young people, even my youngest son, without his name. He talked about losing his smartphone at a concert, and he didn't say, I don't need a new one, I have my own social networks. And now, some weeks ago, when my mother had her birthday, the grandchilds were together, and he put out of his pocket a very strange thing, not smartphone, a mobile phone, but you can just call and send and texting, not more. And then he told us and his cousins, I'm more cool having this simple phone and not a smartphone, because now he's 20 years old, you have to know. The young ladies, they look at him as a further father of their child, and a husband who has a smartphone is not interested in his wife, and so he's he's very cool, and we were all astonished, yeah, what he reported us.
That's great.
That's a lovely story, Franz. Now the audience has spoken with their hands. I'm sure you would like to speak.
I would like to suggest to make a difference between pupil in the kindergarten and the primary school and pupil in the other schools, gym and so on, in the your school type, yeah, for older people. And I would like to suggest digital-free oasis for the younger one in kindergarten and primary school, and the older one, perhaps 12 years and older, 14 years and older, can participate in such wonderful media projects like Franz Glaw described. And I think we have to make differences in the discussion, and we do not should put the same politics for all kind of ages of young people. That's the problem in the discussion, and I would like to have more differentiation.
Thank you. Your name and organization, please, for the audience.
Okay, Ingo Leibner. Okay, no organization. Just Textagentur EcoWords.
Thank you. And we have the next question here.
Hello, Georg Jürgens from the European Council for Steiner Waldorf Education. I have a question for, a reaction more to Konstantin Scheller, who said that we cannot legislate everything. And while I agree that it's true that we cannot legislate everything because children will find their ways around the system, we have a lot of possibilities to legislate on what gets into the school curricula and how we regulate the space in the school and the instruction in the school. And so I would like to make a plea here for thinking about the chance that we have, because we are in control of the school setting as an education system. We can define on what is taught in class, we can also decide on what methods we use, and I would like to advertise, or no, to promote that we develop the consciousness for this possibility that we can actually define on what happens in schools and how, to quite a great extent, and to, out of this, I'm thinking, develop the media pedagogy and not say, well, we cannot do anything about it, so we have to also bring it into the classrooms now. Thank you.
Yes, David Martin, University of Witten-Herdecke. I would also like to react to Konstantin Scheller, saying that at the moment the politicians seem to believe that the parents are too digitally illiterate to give their children adequate education with regard to media, which may be the case for many parents, but is maybe not the case for a lot more parents. And these parents should have the choice as to whether their kindergartens have digital equipment in them or not. And this is a choice that kindergartens can make themselves, and maybe there can be a movement of screen-free kindergartens, and another movement of screen-safe kindergartens for those who think that the parents and their surroundings need support. And there is a paper being distributed right now for you to sign if you're interested in this movement.
Thank you. And the other hand that was at the back?
Thank you. My name is Ágoston Nagy. I'm from Hungary, representing the Hungarian Waldorf Fellowship here, but I also must confess that I'm working in an IT company among dozens of young programmers. And what I have started to miss here is that we are talking about the current stage of technology, which is going to leave us behind much, much sooner than we think. We are in the very last moment when these technological devices are still outside of the bodies. They are already wearable on T-shirts and in watches and their glasses, but very, very soon they will start be implanted into the bodies of the children. And this is the last moment when at least there is a chance to distinguish between physical reality and virtual reality. So this is a next question, whether we are ready to address it and how do we prepare for this. Thank you.
Thank you. I also have to acknowledge that Georg has a plane to catch. Technology impinges on us as always. I do not know if you want to quickly, before you leave, say something to the last question, which was about the body.
Well, I want to remind you what Professor Fuchs said at the end of his presentation, that the age of 0 to 6 years it should be preserved from from digitalization, he said, in a way. And I think this age is the most important age in our life, including pregnancy, for the bodily development. And what you now mention, what is incoming, that makes us even more aware that all the experiences in this age get under the skin. The experiences get under the skin. They are organ forming in this age, not later on. Later on it's different. The plasticity of the brain is still, I hope so, in my body it's given, but the structure of the brain of my heart and of my muscles and of my whole body is really formed in the first 7 years, depending on my experiences, depending on my activity, depending on my emotional and spiritual development. So I really want to focus that there we have to be leaders, that there we have to give guidance, and that the children are not able to self-regulate in this time. So there is no possibility of self-education of children, so that they become competent. So we have to become more competent. That's my message. And sorry, I have to leave now.
We wish you a good journey, and we thank you very much for your insights and contributions. Auf Wiedersehen. Now, at this point, Mikhail, I know you have a question, and we have another session later, but I was told that at this point in the program, the young people would make a statement.
Yes. Well, we are from a Waldorf school in the Netherlands, both three of us. I am Camille Compere, and I'm in my last year, so I'm going to university next year.
My name is Maxime Zeven. I'm also from the Netherlands, and I attend a Waldorf school, and I'm in my pre-last year, so yeah.
I'm Maxime Verheul, and I'm also from the Netherlands, from Nijmegen. I'm in the same school as Camille, and I'm also in my exam year.
Well, today we were asked to tell you about our view on digital media and how this could be used in schools. So we talked about it, we discussed some things about it, and we're going to tell you about it right now. Okay. Well, the first thing we came up with is that balance is the key word. Like, there's always too much, and too much is kind of always wrong, and too little is also always wrong. So you can, digital media can be defined into two things. It's skills, like Word and Excel, and how to use computers, how to use media. And the second thing is behavior, like how do you communicate with people, how do you connect on social media, and how, you have to respect other people, you have to act good around them. It's not like you can do anything on social media just because people can't see your face. So those are the two things that students need to be thought about.
Yes, and then we move on to another point which we find very important, and that is the fact of black and white thinking. Because listening to this conference, we as students experience very large contrasts. So, for example, there's being said that all the classes should be totally incorporated with smartphones, or all the smartphones should be banished from the entire classroom. And what we want to say is that things are much more complicated. There's no absolute decisions that can be made.
Yeah, like you can't just ban anything, because that's not how change works. So if you ban phones from schools, kids will find a way to use them around. They will sneak them around while teachers are not looking. So we think that to teach them about how to use them properly is the way to like use digital media right in our society.
Yeah. For example, in our school, phones are banned. But do you really think that nobody uses their phone in school? We need to check their time, our schedule. Sorry, and the use is less. People in our lunchroom are not constantly sitting like this in their spare time. But the use is not gone, and we think it will go the same if you just ban them.
What we also want to say is digital media already exists and it can be a very powerful tool. So we think it would be it would be a shame not to use it. Because, for example, if we want to check the bus schedule, then we just have an app on our cell phone and we'll just find the bus schedule without further problems. And again, then we come to the point of no black and white thinking, because, for example, these apps are an aid for us in our everyday lives. But on the other hand, social media is quite a controversial theme, as many people regard those aspects of digital media as dangerous or very addictive, and in some respects we agree with that. But on the other hand, we just want to say that digital media should have a supportive role.
I must admit, a lot of the time I look at my phone is for social media, to check on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat and stuff. But the other part is to look up information on the web that otherwise took me hours to find in books or in the library, to check the train schedule, to check where my class is, that kind of stuff. So you don't want to take that away. That is a really, we pretty much can't live without that.
I think that we, as our generation, would really like to look at all the possibilities this digital area brings. You can do so much with it if you use it properly. What also was a point is, like, everybody is talking about digital media, but what does it include? What is it exactly? Like, is it just social media, or is it a whiteboard in your classroom? Is it a program? And for us, it's social media. It's an educational tool, and it's also very important to use it for office abilities. Like, we have to make proper essays when we're in a university. We have to write properly. We have to use those things properly when we work or go to school.
Yeah, for example, we also have programs in school that the teachers use to see if we are in class on time. So they send that to the main computer, and otherwise it has to go all on paper. And that was, back in days, was that the case? But there's a lot of fraud has gone with it. So people weren't in class and nobody saw it, and that's really less these days. So you can use it as a teacher, but you can use it as a student to do your homework.
Yeah, like our conclusion, balance is the key in this. So not too much, not too little. You can ban it, but just learn to use it good for the right things. Thank you.
Excuse me, I think I forgot one thing to say, and but that's very important. And what we really desire is that this theme is looked at from our perspective. So we've heard that digitalisation, it seems to be going very fast, but for us, we were born in a time when digitalisation was contemporary, and I don't think that our generation really feels that there is a rapid development. And I think we can cope with it very well. So what we want to ask from you is maybe more flexibility in your thinking about how digital media affects people, because it really has different impact on whether you have been raised with it or not. So I think this can be said in a cliche sentence, but we will make the change, and the change will affect us. Thank you very much.
I would like to say a special thank you to you. You have thanked us for your attention. And I must also say how reassuring it is for us, after all the alarming things one hears, to listen to you. I think you have contributed very significantly to the discussion. We thank you for being here, and we wish you all the best, and we applaud you again.
Yeah, my name is Michael Mattes from the Alliance for Childhood. My question is to Mr. Scheller. I think, I'm not sure if you were present when the presentation, the first keynote presentation of Mr. Fuchs. So what I want to say is we are very, very proud of the European Commission. Yeah, with this, we have created it together. It also belongs to us. And what I think is that this knowledge that is now, the new research that is now available in the last 10 years. I have read some books 10 years ago, and I was amazed, the new research that is now available. I think in the European Commission, you must let sink in this knowledge. You don't need to take action, but that you are aware of the new research that is now available. That is my wish.
Audrey Flynn, real-time leaders, and my question's for the youngsters. It's kind of two questions. One is, do you guys have an opinion on age-appropriate use of technology? Would you have cut-off points for screen time and things like that? And also, when it comes to balance, how would you see the role of adults in helping you achieve that balance?
Well, regarding the question about the age, I think, yet again, difference is important because, for example, the social skills that come with digital media should be taught very early. So, for example, in primary school, as to prevent cyberbullying, for example. Whereas the more practical skills maybe should be taught later on, for example, in so in the Dutch 9th grade, so that's at age 14, 15, because then you will be aware of the possibilities of it, and you will have the feeling that you learn it for a certain purpose.
Yeah, there's a big difference between the social media and the practical media, like Word, PowerPoint. It's better to learn that on an age of 14, 15 than you can learn how to use Excel. But you get a smartphone on a very early age now, like 10, 12, 13. And so you need to learn how to act social on social media, and more likely that you're really aware that you're talking to other humans and not to some computer or something. So it's really important to learn that on a quite young age.
Thank you so much, panelists and audience.